Imagine a man who never actually picks up a sword.
Yeah.
I mean, he never raises an arm. He never strikes a single physical blow. He basically just locks himself in a room for a few weeks.
Right. Just completely isolates himself.
Yeah, exactly. And yet, using literally nothing but human psychology, like a terrifyingly masterful understanding of the human ego and 12 pieces of paper, he somehow manages to orchestrate the slaughter of thousands of people.
He basically drowns an entire civilization in its own blood. Yeah.
It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're looking at what has to be the ultimate architect of psychological warfare. And we're examining a story that asks a really terrifying question for all of us, which is, how easily can our own desire for guidance actually be weaponized against us?
It's honestly one of the most chilling thought experiments I think you can find in classical literature. And primarily because the mechanics of the manipulation here, they are just so recognizable to us today.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, the villain doesn't use magic, right? He uses the totally predictable, flawed machinery of the human mind.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are stepping into a really profound, heavily layered exploration of human nature, manipulation, and this whole illusion of control. We have a massive stack of notes today, all centered around Volume 2 of Tahirul Mevlevi's commentary on Rumi's Mesnevi.
Yeah, it's a dense text, but so rich.
So rich. To give you a brief roadmap of where we're going, the source material picks up basically right in the middle of this ancient epic narrative about a deceptive Jewish vizier. And this vizier, he intentionally infiltrates an early Christian community with one sole meticulous goal, which is just to destroy it from the inside out.
Right, by pretending to be like their most devoted spiritual guide.
Exactly. But before we unpack the actual mechanics of this story, we definitely need to establish a clear framework for how we are approaching this material today.
Yes, this is crucial. So the text we are analyzing, it obviously contains some very strong theological and historical claims involving Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But our mission in this deep dive is, well, it's not to evaluate the actual historicity of these claims, and we are certainly not delivering a religious sermon or endorsing any specific political or religious viewpoints here.
No, not at all. We're looking at this purely as a masterpiece of philosophical commentary.
Exactly. We're impartially extracting the timeless psychological insights, the really intense debates on free will, and these profound metaphors the author uses to just dissect the human condition.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're looking at the architecture of deception here. And what is so striking about how the author frames this whole narrative is that, before we even meet the vizier, the text kind of forces us to confront our own arrogance.
It really does. It essentially calls the vizier a fool right out of the gate.
Yeah, and not just because his actions are malicious, but because his perspective is just so laughably microscopic. He thinks he's executing this masterstroke of control, but the text basically compares him to a tiny little man trying to punch an unstoppable cosmic force.
It's like he's shadowboxing with reality itself.
Right. The author insists that before we can even begin to understand how the vizier manipulates other people, we have to understand how reality manipulates us first.
And the author uses a very specific philosophical framework to establish this. He contrasts two fundamental states of being. So you have the physical world, which he describes as mahdud, meaning limited or bounded.
Okay, mahdud.
Yeah. And then you have the realm of meaning, which is geri maputer, meaning limitless or infinite.
I see.
The whole foundation of the argument here is that human beings suffer from this chronic, almost fatal overconfidence in our own perception. We look out at the world, we register the physical boundaries of what our five senses can detect, and we just falsely conclude, yep, that's everything. I'm seeing the entirety of reality.
And the analogies the text provides to illustrate this blind spot are, they're beautifully simple, but they completely dismantle your confidence in your own senses. The first one is the passenger on a ship.
Oh, I love this one.
Right, so imagine you're standing on the deck of a ship, middle of the ocean. You look out, and your eye naturally just draws a line where the water meets the sky.
The horizon.
Exactly. And to your naked eye, that horizon is the absolute edge of existence. There is nothing beyond it. But the second you hold a pair of binoculars to your face, boom, a distant ship materializes out of nowhere.
Out of the void.
Yeah. Your reality just expanded. But not because the universe actually changed, right?
Yeah.
It's just because your instrument of perception improved.
Right. And the text scales this concept up and down to prove that our baseline perception is basically a hallucination by omission.
A hallucination by omission, I like that.
Yeah. Look at the moon. For literally thousands of years, humanity looked up and just saw this flat, glowing disk, right? Like a pristine celestial ornament.
We built whole mythologies around how perfectly smooth it was.
Exactly. But then the invention of the telescope comes along and completely shatters that illusion. It reveals this brutal landscape of jagged mountains and deep valleys and violent craters. The reality of the moon was, always there, just waiting out our ignorance.
Waiting out our ignorance.
Mm.
Wow. And then the author takes us in the total opposite direction, down to the microscopic level. Like, consider just a single drop of water.
Oh, yeah.
You look at it resting on a leaf, and it looks like the most simple, uniform substance in the universe. It's literally just a wet speck.
Just a tiny puddle.
But you place that exact same drop under a microscope, and suddenly you are staring into this sprawling, chaotic metropolis. You've got wriggling cells, amoebas, microscopic life forms, just battling for survival.
An entire universe existing in a space we literally thought was empty.
Right. And so what does this actually mean for us?
Well, it's a crucial epistemological point. The underlying logic here is all about causality and unseen forces. The text is establishing that just because we as humans cannot perceive a larger, more complex reality, that doesn't mean that reality isn't actively operating on us right now.
So the vizier thinks his little political machinations are the absolute highest level of reality.
Exactly. He is completely blind to the divine decrees and these massive cosmic scales operating right above his head. And the commentator, Tahirul Mevlevi, he really emphasizes this by bringing in some staggering astronomical figures.
Which is crazy considering the era of the text. Like, the author notes that the sun is 1.3 million times larger than the Earth.
Yeah, they actually had the math.
And they even cite the distance to Alpha Centauri,
Yeah.
noting it's roughly 31 trillion kilometers away. And the commentary, to make this make sense to a human, translates this vastness into a train ride. It calculates that it would take a train traveling continuously for 93 million years just to bridge that gap.
Just an unfathomable distance.
Right. And so after laying out this crushing immensity of space, the author looks back at our tiny planet and describes the physical world as a prison for the human soul. He compares it to the infinitely broader earth of God, the realm of pure meaning.
Which is a heavy word. Prison.
Yeah, and here is where it gets really interesting for me, because calling the world a prison sounds, it sounds a bit depressing. Is the author saying we should just give up on the physical world entirely? Just hate being alive?
I get why people have that defensive reaction. It does sound deeply pessimistic at first glance, but the text provides this brilliant visual metaphor to clarify the why behind that word.
Okay.
It suggests that our experience of the physical world is kind of like holding your own hand directly over your eyes.
Oh, right.
Now, the hand itself is objectively very small, right? But because it is pressed so tightly against your face, it successfully blocks out the entirety of the cosmos. So calling the physical world a prison isn't like a demand to hate your life or go sit in a dark cave. It's a diagnostic tool. You literally cannot begin the work of seeking actual truth until you first admit that your current vantage point is compromised.
That is such a good way to frame it. So if human perception is so easily tricked, right, if it's so easily hijacked by just a hand over our eyes or a limit on our vision, it naturally transitions us to the next massive question the text tackles.
Right, which is the predator question.
Exactly. If we are blind to the stars, how blind are we to the predators living right among us? How easily are we tricked by false leaders and, honestly, more importantly, by our own internal egos?
Yeah, our own desires.
Right. And this brings us to this fascinating narrative detour in the text. It's a story meant to show the absolute danger of operating on raw, unguided intellect. The story of Jinkigav.
The treasure of the cow.
Yes, the treasure of the cow.
This story is such a profoundly cynical yet totally accurate critique of human behavior. So the anecdote takes place in ancient Persia. You have this humble farmer, right? He's out plowing his fields, just engaging in ordinary, repetitive, honest labor.
Just doing his job.
Exactly, but suddenly his cow steps really heavily onto this patch of dirt. Its hoof breaks through the crust of the earth, it strikes something hard, and the farmer digs into that exact spot and uncovers this massive buried treasure.
Which is basically the ultimate fantasy, right? Sudden, unearned wealth. Just a pure stroke of chaotic luck.
Totally. But the tragedy, according to the author, isn't the discovery of the treasure itself. It's what happens to the human mind in the aftermath of that discovery.
The fallout.
Right. following that single event, this literal contagion of foolishness spreads. People just abandon their trades, they stop studying, they leave their plows, and instead they begin following cows around the fields.
Literally just stalking livestock.
Yes. They stalk the animals blindly, just staring at their hooves, desperately hoping that if they just follow the beast long enough, it will randomly step on another hidden fortune.
That's amazing.
And the text introduces this magnificent kind of mocking phrase for this exact behavior. Supers yapmak.
Which translates to what?
It translates to making your own beard a broom for a cow's tail.
Making your beard a broom for a cow's tail.
Uh,
I mean, think about the sheer humiliation in that image. You have a human being supposedly endowed with intellect, reason, the capacity for deep spiritual growth.
and they are literally dragging their face in the dirt behind a farm animal waiting for a payout.
It's so absurd, but it's so real. It's easy to laugh at these ancient Persians in the story, but the psychological mechanism here is completely alive and well today.
Oh, everywhere.
We just replaced the cow. Think about modern hustle culture, right? Or the obsession with blindly following whatever the latest trend is. Someone gets rich overnight off a random cryptocurrency or some viral video, and immediately, millions of people abandon the actual hard, quiet work of cultivating real skills.
Yep.
And they just blindly follow that exact same algorithm, literally sweeping the dirt with their beards, hoping the digital cow will step on gold for them too.
That is the exact modern equivalent. We elevate our basest, most instinctual desires, and we just hope they will serve as our compass to profound fulfillment.
But they won't.
Right. The philosophical argument here is that whatever you follow, you become. If you subordinate your intellect and your spiritual potential to the random meandering of an animal instinct, whether that is, greed or lust or just the pursuit of fleeting status, you effectively lower your own spiritual status to that of the beast.
Wow.
And to drive this warning home, Tahirul Mevlevi actually brings in a highly controversial piece of mythology here, the legend of Harut and Marut.
Oh, right. The fallen angels. The inclusion of the Harut and Marut myth here is such a brilliant piece of meta-commentary by the author.
It really is.
So just to catch you up, the basic legend goes like this. There were these two deeply pious angels, Harut and Marut, and they believed they were superior to humanity because, they didn't suffer from earthly temptations.
They thought humans were just weak.
Exactly. So to test them, God sends them down to earth, where they are almost immediately seduced by this breathtakingly beautiful woman named Zura. She manipulates them, extracts their divine secret name, and then uses that magical knowledge to ascend into the heavens herself, where she physically transforms into the glowing planet Venus.
And the angels.
The two fallen angels, meanwhile, are punished by being hung upside down in a dark well in Babylon. Just a brutal reversal of fate.
But here is the fascinating part. Tahirul Mevlevi halts his commentary right in the middle of recounting this story, just to explicitly state that this story is an unfounded fabrication.
Wait, really? He stops the text to say it's fake?
Yes. He cites multiple Islamic scholars to assert that angels, by their theological definition, do not even possess the capacity to sin. He explains that this narrative is actually an ancient Jewish mythological motif that just sort of seeped into popular Islamic folklore over the centuries.
Okay, so he wants the reader to know, categorically, that the literal events of the story are pure fiction.
Exactly.
Which naturally raises the question, why on earth include a fake story in a deep, serious, philosophical treatise?
And this is where Rumi's absolute genius shines. Rumi actually leverages the very fact that the public wants to believe this myth. He uses their gullibility to deliver a devastating psychological critique.
Okay, lay it on me.
He essentially corners his audience and asks them, look, you are perfectly willing to embrace this fantastical fairy tale where a human woman commits an act of seduction, steals a magic word, and is miraculously transformed upward, becoming a brilliant celestial body.
Right, everyone loves the idea of magical upward mobility.
Exactly. But Rumi asks, if you can believe in that impossible magical ascension, why do you so aggressively ignore the mundane downward transformation happening in your own actual life?
Oh, wow. That is a gut punch.
It's a complete critique of our selective belief systems. Rumi points out the hypocrisy of human imagination, like we romanticize the impossible while we completely ignore the inevitable.
And the inevitable reality is what? The cow.
Yes. The inevitable reality is that a human being who makes their beard a broom for a cow's tail, someone who blindly surrenders to their lowest physical appetites, undergoes a spiritual mutation. But they don't transform upward. They transform downward into mud and clay.
Sinking to the lowest of the low.
The text refers to this degradation as sinking to the Esphilokisa Philin. You don't become a glowing planet, you become the literal dirt the cow walks on.
That is just, I mean, that exploration of our desperate, blind desire for shortcuts and our willingness to just abandon our intellect, it perfectly sets the stage for the return of our villain. Because the deceptive Jewish vizier is a master student of this exact psychological vulnerability. Like, he understands that the Christian community he has infiltrated is totally desperate for spiritual treasure. They're looking for a guide to follow.
Right, they want their cow to step on gold.
Exactly. And he knows exactly how to weaponize their devotion, not by giving them what they want, but by forcefully taking it away.
Yeah, the vizier's master plan totally hinges on the psychology of deprivation, which is so dark.
So dark.
He doesn't launch a theological debate, right? He doesn't try to dismantle their beliefs directly. Instead, he just abruptly locks himself inside a small room.
Just closes the door.
He enters a state of helvet, which is a strict spiritual seclusion, for 40 to 50 days, and he absolutely refuses to interact with his devoted followers. He cuts off the supply of his guidance completely.
And the reaction from the community is instantaneous and just so visceral. The text paints a picture of absolute mass hysteria. You have these disciples gathering outside his locked door, literally weeping and tearing at their clothes. And the language they use to beg him to come out is incredibly revealing. Like, they call him their nurse. They say his words are the only milk that sustains them.
Milk. Wow.
They literally compare themselves to featherless, blind baby birds, crying out that if he doesn't emerge to protect them, the cats of the world will eat them alive. They regress entirely to a state of infantile panic.
Because by removing himself, the vizier creates an artificial vacuum. He manufactures scarcity. And when a perceived source of ultimate truth or safety is suddenly withdrawn like that, the human mind often abandons critical thinking entirely. It just shifts into pure survival mode.
Right.
The followers are no longer evaluating the quality of his teachings at all. They're simply starving for his presence. They will accept any condition, any doctrine, just to have their psychological pacifier returned to them.
I read this sequence, and honestly, it felt incredibly contemporary. We see this exact architecture of manipulation in modern cult dynamics, in high-control political groups, and even on a micro level in toxic interpersonal relationships.
Oh, absolutely. The cycle of abuse.
It is the classic cycle of love bombing, followed by sudden, unexplained withdrawal. You flood the target with attention, wisdom, a sense of exclusive belonging, making them entirely dependent on your validation.
And then you shut the door.
You shut the door. And the ensuing panic strips away all their boundaries, so when you finally crack the door open again, they are entirely subservient.
And the reason this manipulation is so devastatingly effective in this specific spiritual context is because it mimics a highly revered, legitimate state of spiritual development.
Oh, really? It's a real concept.
Yes. The vizier is exploiting a concept known in Sufi tradition as fen-fiche, which basically translates to the disciples' annihilation in the master.
Annihilation in the master.
In its pure form, this is a profound, beautiful process. It's about completely surrendering the ego to a verified, true spiritual guide as a stepping stone to experiencing divine unity. And to illustrate what this looks like when it is actually authentic, the text shares this hauntingly beautiful anecdote about a disciple of Kushadalashe Ibrahim Effendi.
I was deeply struck by this anecdote when I read the notes, because it captures the exact psychological state the vizier is trying to hijack. So the story goes that one of the sheikh's disciples experiences this profound, vivid dream.
Right.
In the dream, the disciple is standing still, and he sees his sheikh walking toward him from a distance. But as the master draws closer, the disciple looks down at his own hands, his own torso, and he realizes his physical body is dissolving.
Just fading away.
Yeah. With every step the master takes toward him, a piece of the disciple's own identity just vanishes. By the time the master finally reaches him, the disciple has completely disappeared. Only the image of the master remains.
Wow.
And when the disciple wakes up and shares this terrifying but beautiful vision, Kushadalashe Effendi simply smiles and tells him, "That is how you must be."
It is the perfect metaphor for the total dissolution of arrogance, self-interest, and this illusion of separateness we all carry. The disciple basically has to empty his own cup completely before it can be filled with divine meaning.
But the tragedy of our narrative is that the vizier's Christian followers have reached this vulnerable, porous state of surrender. Like they are ready to dissolve their egos.
Yes, their cups are empty.
But instead of pouring divine truth into their empty cups, The vizier is preparing to pour in a lethal poison.
Exactly. The followers are weeping through the wood of the door, offering him their complete annihilation.
Mm.
And the vizier's response is just a masterclass in psychological deflection.
What does he say?
He speaks from the shadows of his room and says, I cannot come out. I must stay inside. Be silent. Stop your crying, and you will hear the divine call directly.
So he's essentially telling them they don't need his physical presence anymore, that God is acting upon them without an intermediary.
Right. And this specific deflection triggers a massive, text-wide philosophical detour into one of the most difficult questions of human existence: the debate between free will and absolute destiny.
Because the followers refuse to accept his withdrawal. They cry out with this defining statement, "We are the harp, you strike the strings."
Which is a statement of pure, absolute determinism.
Right. They are arguing that they possess no independent agency, no internal engine of action. They are merely an instrument, and without his hand to strike them, they are incapable of producing music.
And the author actually pauses the narrative here because this sentiment, this desire to abdicate responsibility by claiming we are entirely controlled by external forces, it is a totally universal human temptation.
It's so much easier to say, "It's out of my hands."
Exactly. And the text provides three incredibly vivid metaphors to explore this illusion of control, really testing the boundaries of whether we actually drive our own lives or if we are just along for the ride.
Okay, let's go through them. The first one is the lion on the flag.
Yes, the lion. So imagine a massive battle standard made of silk with a ferocious lion painted right on it. When the wind rushes across the battlefield, the silk billows and the painted lion appears to lunge, retreat, and attack.
It looks intensely alive.
But the lion is doing absolutely nothing. It is merely pigment on fabric. The wind is the only actor. So the followers are essentially claiming, we are the lion. The divine is the wind.
Wow. And the second metaphor deepens this sense of powerlessness even further. It is the image of the embroiderer.
Right, the thread.
Picture an artist painstakingly stitching a figure onto a blank canvas. The artist has total authority. They can use dark thread to create a hideous, terrifying demon, or they can use gold thread to craft a radiant angel.
And the thread itself has no voice.
Exactly. It has no mouth to scream, "Why are you making me ugly?" It cannot protest its design. It is entirely subject to the will of the needle.
The third metaphor, though, brings this whole philosophical abstract crashing right back into painful reality.
Oh, this is my favorite one.
It is the story of a young scholar named Sinan Pasha, and he falls deeply into the philosophy of Sophism. He becomes completely obsessed with the idea that the physical world is entirely illusory. Like, it's just a matrix of deception where nothing actually exists and therefore nothing actually matters.
Typical undergrad philosophy major phase.
Basically. So he is sitting at the dinner table, pontificating about this to his father, and his father happens to be a highly practical, no-nonsense judge.
A bad audience for this theory.
The worst. So Sinan points to the heavy copper plate holding their meal and declares, we perceive this plate, we think it has weight and form, but in reality, it is merely an illusion of our senses.
And what does the dad do?
His father listens patiently, then calmly picks up the solid copper plate and violently smacks Sinan right over the head with it.
Just clocks him with the plate.
Yes. Sinan grabs his bleeding head and screams in agony, and his father just leans over and asks, do you believe the copper plate is real now?
It is a phenomenal, blunt force dismantling of pseudo-intellectual escapism. The father is proving that you can construct whatever elaborate philosophical defense mechanism you want to deny reality, but pain will always, always anchor you back to the truth.
It's unavoidable. And this story serves a really critical function in the text's debate on free will. The followers weeping at the door are using this deterministic poetry, we are the harp, we are the lion on the flag, basically to avoid the agonizing responsibility of taking charge of their own spiritual survival.
Which really brings us to the core tension of the human experience, doesn't it? If we entertain the deterministic view, like if we are just thread on a canvas or paint lunging in the wind, how do we explain the complex psychological landscape of our own minds?
Right, the internal experience.
Yeah. If I am merely a machine executing a pre-written code, why do I feel the crushing weight of guilt when I betray a friend? Why do I feel pride when I help a stranger? If my actions are not my own, why is my internal life so totally obsessed with the morality of my choices?
That is the exact counter-argument the text brilliantly deploys. The author introduces a concept: sickness brings wakefulness.
Sickness brings wakefulness.
Consider the state of perfect health. When your body is functioning flawlessly, you often just coast through your days on autopilot, right? You ignore your physical limitations, maybe you're eating poorly or sleeping too little, completely unreflective.
Taking it for granted.
But the moment you are struck by a severe illness, the moment you are confined to a bed with a raging fever, you are thrust into a state of acute wakefulness. The distraction of daily motion is gone.
Right, the fever clarity.
Yes. And in that quiet, painful clarity, your mind inevitably drifts to your past actions. You suddenly see your mistakes with brutal clarity, you feel profound regret for time wasted or words spoken in anger, and you vow, deeply and sincerely, that if you recover, you will change your ways.
It strips away all the noise and leaves you alone with your conscience.
Precisely. And the commentary argues that this universal experience of regret is the definitive death blow to absolute determinism.
How so?
Because if human beings were truly entirely devoid of agency, if we were merely the embroidered thread or the painted lion, we would never possess the capacity to feel shame. A broken clock doesn't feel guilty for displaying the wrong time. A computer doesn't feel remorse when it crashes.
That makes perfect sense.
The very fact that we experience the agony of wishing we had chosen differently is the ultimate irrefutable proof that we possess iredaikusia, which translates to partial free will.
Partial free will.
We do not control the wind, and we do not control the canvas we are stitched onto, but we possess an undeniable agency in how we navigate those constraints. Our shame is the footprint of our freedom.
Our shame is the footprint of our freedom. That is incredibly powerful. It perfectly captures the inescapable nature of our agency. We try so hard to philosophize our way out of accountability, but our own internal emotional reactions betray us every time.
We can't lie to ourselves forever.
And the text actually highlights this absurdity with a classic joke, right? Featuring Nasrat and Hodja, the famous trickster figure of Middle Eastern folklore.
Oh, the snow joke, yes.
So Hodja gathers his friends and proudly announces a culinary breakthrough. He says, "I have invented a brand new dish, eating snow with bread."
Which sounds terrible.
Right. His friends look at him with utter skepticism, and after a moment of silence, Hodja just shrugs and admits, "To be honest, even I found it a bit cold."
It perfectly encapsulates the collision between our internal fictions and external reality. We invent elaborate philosophies to justify our behavior. We try to convince ourselves that eating snow is a delicacy or that we have no responsibility for our actions.
But reality always pushes back. The coldness of the snow, the pain of the copper plate, the sting of a guilty conscience, we just cannot escape the burden of choice.
Which makes the followers' situation outside the vizier's door so much more tragic. They are aggressively trying to surrender their iredaikusia, their partial free will, to a man who is actively plotting their total annihilation.
And while they are out there weeping and begging to be his harp, the vizier, hidden away in his dark room, is finally executing the masterstroke of his sabotage.
This is the turning point.
Yeah. This is where the story shifts from psychological manipulation to catastrophic engineered violence. What does he do in the room?
Well, while he's secluded in his halvet, projecting this illusion of deep, silent communion with the divine, the vizier is actually writing.
He's working.
He produces 12 distinct damars, or large scrolls, and the genius of his malice lies in the actual content of these texts. He doesn't just write 12 different perspectives, he writes 12 systems of religious law that completely mathematically contradict one another.
Like completely opposite.
The commentary notes they were as fundamentally opposed as the letters A to Z.
It is the intentional manufacturing of irreconcilable realities. Like one scroll might dictate that fasting is the absolute only path to salvation, while another scroll explicitly states that fasting is a mortal sin that destroys the soul.
Right. One might demand absolute pacifism, while another requires aggressive holy war.
It is total engineered chaos. But the scrolls alone aren't enough to start a fire, right? He needs ambitious hands to carry the sparks.
And the setup for this is chilling in its precision. The vizier quietly summons the 12 emirs, these are the trusted foundational leaders of the Christian community, to his locked door, one by one, under the cover of night.
Very secretive.
He opens the door just a crack, hands a specific scroll to the emir, and whispers a tailored poison right into his ear. He tells each man privately, "You, and only you, are my true successor."
Oh, man. Playing right to their ego.
You are the sole possessor of the authentic divine truth contained in this scroll. When I am gone, you must lead the people, and you must ruthlessly eliminate anyone who opposes the doctrine written here.
So he takes 12 ambitious, deeply devoted men, hands them 12 absolute, contradictory truths, and basically gives each of them a divine mandate to murder the other 11.
It's a locked-room puzzle of mass destruction.
And then, to ensure the trap snaps shut perfectly, the vizier does the one thing that prevents anyone from ever unraveling the conspiracy.
He kills himself.
He kills himself. He permanently removes himself from the board so that no one can ever knock on his door and ask for clarification or compare notes. His silence becomes the ultimate validation of the scrolls.
The aftermath is just apocalyptic. Upon discovering his death, the community plunges into a month of massive theatrical mourning.
Everyone is united in grief.
The text describes a scene of absolute unified devastation. People from all nations and factions are tearing their clothes, pulling their hair out by the roots, and throwing handfuls of dirt over their heads, collectively weeping for the loss of the supposedly great saint.
But this unity is entirely superficial. It's held together only by shared grief over a shared illusion, because the moment the official mourning period concludes, the trap springs.
The 12 emirs step forward into the tower vacuum.
Each man pulls his secret scroll from his robes. Each man stands before the community and claims absolute, uncompromising authority, backed by the final secret will of the martyr.
And because the doctrines in the scrolls are explicitly designed to offer no middle ground whatsoever, diplomacy is mathematically impossible.
Right. You cannot compromise between a doctrine that commands you to kill and a doctrine that commands you to submit.
The psychological tension just shatters and a massive civil war erupts. The very followers who, literally just weeks prior, were weeping together as brothers outside a wooden door are now butchering each other in the streets.
It's horrifying.
The poetic imagery used to describe the fallout is brutal. The text speaks of mountains of dust kicked up by the marching of fractured armies and rivers of blood flowing through the once unified city.
I really think we need to pause and truly absorb the terrifying efficiency of what the vizier accomplished here.
It's unparalleled.
He didn't forge a single sword. He didn't spend years training an army or building siege engines. He didn't have to look a single victim in the eye and strike a blow. All he did was manipulate the human ego's desperate need to possess the exclusive truth.
He weaponized their devotion.
Yes. Their fear of being leaderless, their latent ambition. He handed out 12 pieces of paper labeled "The Truth" and simply walked away, knowing that human nature would do all the heavy lifting of slaughtering the population.
It is the ultimate masterclass in ideological destabilization, and the commentary refuses to let the reader merely spectate this historical horror as if it's an action movie. It immediately forces us to examine the internal spiritual state of the people who died fighting this meaningless war.
Right, it turns the mirror on us.
To do this, the author introduces a really powerful agricultural metaphor, the walnut.
The metaphor of the broken walnuts. This is where the text demands we look at our own motivations, right?
Yes. The author compares the bodies left rotting on the battlefield to a pile of cracked walnuts.
Okay, unpacking this.
The physical body, the outward appearance, and the loudly proclaimed beliefs. These are merely the hard shell of the walnut. What actually matters, the only thing that possesses true value in the eyes of the divine, is the meat inside the shell. This inner meat represents pure spiritual intent, sincerity, and authentic meaning.
So if a walnut is struck hard and cracked open, and it possesses a rich, nourishing meat inside, then that inner essence survives the destruction of its shell. The value remains intact.
Exactly.
But if a walnut looks perfectly normal on the outside, yet is blighted, dry, and entirely empty on the inside, then the cracking of the shell is a total catastrophe. It reveals that the object was always just a piece of useless garbage masquerading as sustenance.
The text is really driving at the supreme importance of hidden intent versus outward action. And to anchor this metaphor in reality, the commentary brings up a fascinating historical account from the Battle of Uhud.
Which was a major and incredibly difficult early Islamic battle.
Right. And the story focuses on a fighter named Kuzman. During the chaos of the battle, Kuzman fought with astonishing bravery. He was a whirlwind of violence, taking down numerous enemies and protecting the flank before finally suffering a catastrophic mortal wound.
So his shell looks heroic. As Kuzman lies bleeding out on the battlefield, his fellow fighters gather around him. They're weeping, praising his incredible sacrifice, telling him he's a hero of the faith, a true martyr who has earned an immediate place in paradise. His outward shell looks perfectly heroic.
But Kuzman, with his dying breath, cracks his own shell open and reveals the empty reality inside.
What does he say?
He stops their praises and says, "Do not call me a martyr. I did not fight for the faith, and I did not fight for God. I only fought because I didn't want the enemy to destroy the beautiful date palms of Medina."
Wow. He died for trees.
That confession radically redefines his existence. His physical actions were completely indistinguishable from those of a deeply pious martyr, but his internal reality was entirely material and ego-driven. He died for trees, not for truth.
And the commentary uses Kuzmin's story to deliver this stark, terrifying warning to the reader about the danger of carrying a wooden sword in a magnificent scabbard. The imagery of the wooden sword is incredibly evocative. Imagine you are walking through the world with this massive, jewel-encrusted scabbard swinging from your hip. The leather is perfectly tooled, the gold accents catch the sun, and everyone who sees you assumes you are a terrifying, elite warrior.
An imposing figure.
Your outward presentation, your pious words, your public rituals, your loud defense of whatever scroll you follow is flawless. But the blade hidden inside that beautiful scabbard is just a piece of weak, carved pine.
And as long as there is peace, as long as you are never truly tested, you can maintain the illusion.
Right, no one knows.
But the text warns that eventually the battle will come. A profound moral crisis will hit, or the ultimate crisis of death will arrive, and you will be forced to draw the sword from the scabbard. If your soul is made of wood, the moment it strikes the hard steel of reality, it will shatter into splinters. You will be utterly destroyed.
Just like the 12 Emirs.
Exactly. The 12 Emirs and their thousands of followers all believed they were drawing divine steel to defend the truth. But their swords were carved from ego, ambition, and blind adherence to a manipulator. When they clashed, they revealed themselves to be empty walnuts, shattering each other for absolutely nothing.
So having dragged us through this brutal analysis of deception, empty walnuts, and shattered wooden swords, the text finally, thankfully, pivots toward a solution.
We need one at this point.
Yeah, we need some hope. It asks the most urgent question of the entire commentary. If human perception is so easily blinded, and if an entire civilization of devoted seekers could be so thoroughly manipulated by a fake guide, how do you or I survive? How do we develop the discernment to spot a true spiritual guide and avoid the predators?
The author steps away from the battlefield and into the garden here. He provides a botanical diagnostic tool, basically, to help us evaluate the people we allow to influence our minds. He asks us to learn the difference between the pomegranate and the tulip.
The laughing pomegranate. It is such an unexpected, joyful image after so much darkness and blood. The text advises the seeker of truth to look for a guide who resembles a perfectly ripe, laughing pomegranate.
Right.
For those who haven't spent time in an orchard, when a pomegranate reaches the absolute peak of its ripeness, the pressure of the sweet, juice-filled seeds inside becomes too much for the outer rind to contain. The skin tightens, and the fruit literally splits open.
It cracks.
The resulting crack makes the fruit look like it has a wide, jagged smile. It is laughing.
Yeah.
And through that crack, the brilliant, ruby-red, gem-like seeds burst outward for the world to see.
The brilliance of the laughing pomegranate is that it requires absolutely no marketing.
No PR team.
Exactly. It doesn't have to stand on a pulpit and declare, "I am full of sweet truth." Its internal worth, its profound substance, naturally and uncontrollably erupts through its exterior. It simply cannot hide its own ripeness.
It's effortless.
The true guide is transparent, perhaps even a bit physically weathered or cracked on the outside, but overflowing with genuine, sustaining spiritual nourishment. Now, the author asks us to contrast this vibrant authenticity with the dark-hearted tulip.
The tulip is the ultimate warning against prioritizing aesthetics over substance. From a distance, a tulip is striking. It stands tall on a straight green stem, and its petals are vibrant, smooth, and impeccably elegant. It looks almost regal, the picture of perfection.
Beautiful on the outside.
But if you walk up to an open tulip and look straight down into its center, past the beautiful petals to the very base of the flower, you will see a core that is pitch black.
And the false guide, the vizier, is the tulip. They present an immaculate, highly curated exterior. Their words are eloquent, their rituals are precise, and they look exactly how a leader is supposed to look.
But their core,
the internal engine driving their actions, is a dark, black void of ego, ambition, and a desire for control. They look beautiful, but they offer no sustenance whatsoever. The text demands that we stop evaluating leaders by the smoothness of their petals and start looking for the spilled juice of the pomegranate.
But practically speaking, how do we perform this evaluation? How do you distinguish the pomegranate from the tulip before you've given them control of your life? Or worse, before the Civil War starts?
The commentary suggests we must evaluate the alchemy of their presence. How does being near this person fundamentally alter your own internal state?
The alchemy of their presence.
The text explains that spending consistent time with true people of meaning acts as a form of spiritual alchemy. If you sit with someone and find that over time your anxieties begin to quiet down, your arrogant assumptions dissolve, and you find yourself becoming genuinely more patient, more humble, and more connected to a sense of universal truth.
If their proximity slowly turns the dense rock of your ego into a polished jewel.
Yes, then you are in the presence of a laughing pomegranate.
That is the ultimate litmus test. If spending time with a leader or consuming a certain thinker's content makes you feel elite, agitated, constantly fearful, or furious at the people holding different scrolls, you are likely being poisoned by a tulip. You have to evaluate the fruit their presence bears in your own mind, not the volume of their leaves.
This deep focus on the long-term effects of a leader's actions transitions perfectly into the final, sweeping section of our deep dive.
The big picture.
The author zooms out from the microscopic evaluation of individual guides and the specific story of the vizier to examine the massive, echoing lineage of truth and falsehood throughout history. To contextualize the vizier's crime, the text references a brutal historical precedent, a king named Zunuvis of Yemen.
Zunuvis is an incredibly dark figure in history, known as the leader of the Ashaba Udud. He was another king who engaged in the severe persecution of early Christians. He famously dug massive fiery trenches and threw believers into the flames if they refused to renounce their faith.
Brutal stuff.
So why does the text pull this specific, horrific historical figure into a philosophical discussion about a deceptive vizier?
To establish a profound, terrifying moral principle about the half-life of evil. The text argues that the architect of a deceptive or violent system doesn't just bear the guilt of their own immediate actions. They bear the cumulative spiritual weight of every single sin committed by everyone who follows the tradition they established.
Wow. Every single sin.
To illustrate how heavy this burden is, the commentary cites the political history of the Umayyad dynasty.
The Umayyads were an early, powerful Islamic dynasty, and they established a deeply toxic political tradition. To secure their grip on power and delegitimize their rivals, they instituted a mandatory practice where every single Friday across the empire, the imams were required to publicly curse Ali, the Prophet's cousin, and a deeply revered figure, from the pulpit.
It was a tradition engineered purely to institutionalize division and hatred.
And that tradition continued for decades, poisoning the minds of generations.
Right. And the commentary notes that it wasn't until a later highly righteous leader named Caliph Umar bin Abdulaziz came to power that the tradition was broken.
He finally stopped it.
Yes. Umar bin Abdulaziz recognized the spiritual rot this practice was causing, abolished the mandatory curse entirely, and replaced it with the recitation of a beautiful Quranic verse promoting justice, kindness, and peace.
The philosophical point here is staggering. The Umayyad rulers who invented that curse bear the spiritual responsibility for every single time a citizen uttered it in hatred for decades after their deaths.
It echoes through time.
Similarly, the vizier didn't just commit suicide, he birthed a perpetual lineage of violence. The 12 emirs are guilty of drawing their swords, absolutely, but the vizier is the architect of the slaughter. He bears the root guilt for every drop of blood spilled in the river, because he institutionalized the deception.
But Rumi and his commentator refused to end this epic exploration on a note of perpetual, echoing darkness.
I'm glad, because that's heavy.
They counter the chaotic, blood-soaked legacy of the 12 contradictory scrolls with one of the most stunning and hopeful metaphors in classical literature. To combat the terrifying illusion of fragmented, warring truths, the text introduces the metaphor of the 10 lamps.
This metaphor is the perfect synthesis of everything we've spent the last hour unpacking. It brings the cosmic scale, the danger of false perception, and the necessity of looking past the exterior all into one room.
Tell us about the lamps.
Imagine you walk into a pitch-black room carrying 10 different lamps. If you look at them before they're lit, you see a world of profound differences. One might be a crude oil lamp molded from river clay. Another might be a highly ornate brass lantern etched with calligraphy. Another could be a delicate glass candle holder, or even a modern heavy-duty flashlight.
Their physical containers are all different.
Exactly. Their containers, the materials they're made from, the shape of their wicks, their scrolls, if you will, are completely, undeniably different.
And if you are a surface-level thinker, A person who makes their beard a broom for a cow's tail, or a person seduced by the smooth black petals of the tulip, you will become obsessed with those physical containers.
You'll miss the point entirely.
Right. You will argue that only the clay lamp is authentic because it is ancient, or that only the brass lantern is valid because it is beautiful. You will draw your wooden sword and fight to the death over the shape of the metal.
But what happens when you actually light them? If you ignite all 10 lamps, the darkness is banished, and the room is filled with illumination. And if you stand in the center of that illuminated room and look at the brightness itself, a miraculous thing happens.
The light merges.
You cannot distinguish the light. You cannot point to a beam resting on the wall and definitively say, those specific photons came from the clay lamp and those came from the glass candle. The physical boundaries of the containers become entirely irrelevant in the presence of the output. The containers are many, but the light is one single, indivisible reality.
The altar reinforces this with another visceral image. Imagine you have 100 separate apples resting on a table. As long as they remain in their physical forms, you can divide them. You can count them, you can organize them by size, you can argue over which one has the reddest skin or the roundest shape.
You can create 100 different factions based on the aesthetics of the skin.
Exactly. But if you take all 100 apples, place them into a heavy press, and squeeze them with immense pressure, the number 100 instantly disappears. The physical boundaries rupture, the skins are discarded, and the essence of the fruit flows together into one single, unified pool of juice.
This completely unravels the vizier's strategy.
Totally dismantles it.
The evil vizier operated entirely in the realm of the madud, the limited physical world. He used the differences in the physical letters of the 12 scrolls, the legalistic traps, the artificial boundaries of ego to carve the community into warring factions. He convinced them that the container was the only thing that mattered.
But true spiritual guides, the laughing pomegranates of history, they don't point to the intricate brass of their own lantern. They point to the illumination filling the room.
They used the unified light of meaning to bring the shattered walnuts back together, teaching us to transcend the fragile, physical containers that constantly threaten to divide us.
It is a remarkable, exhausting, and ultimately elevating intellectual journey. We have traveled from the depths of profound psychological deception to the very heights of spiritual unity.
We really have covered a staggering amount of ground today. We started by looking through a telescope at the jagged mountains of the moon, forcing ourselves to admit the severe limits of our own perception.
We watch the tragic absurdity of humans dragging their beards behind a cow, trading their intellect for the promise of unearned treasure.
We analyzed the terrifying vulnerability of a community deprived of guidance, begging an unseen villain for milk like featherless birds. We debated the agonizing weight of our own shame as the ultimate proof that we are not just paint lunging in the wind, but creatures burdened with free will.
We stood on a battlefield choked with dust and blood, watching men shatter each other over 12 pieces of paper because their swords were made of wood.
And finally, we found a path out of the darkness, guided by the bursting seeds of the laughing pomegranate and the indivisible, unified light of 10 lamps.
The architecture of the text demands that we do not simply observe this journey, but internalize it.
So as we wrap up this massive exploration, what is the core takeaway for you, listening right now? What do you do with the weight of this commentary? I think it is an urgent, daily demand for relentless discernment. You must be incredibly, fiercely careful about whose scroll you are choosing to read.
Pay close attention to the alchemy of your environment. Are the voices you follow turning your inner landscape into a polished jewel, or are they feeding your darkest anxieties?
And above all, you must commit to the quiet, unglamorous work of cracking your own shell. Cultivate your inner meat. Ensure that your soul is not merely a wooden sword hiding in a shiny, socially acceptable scabbard, waiting to shatter into splinters the moment reality strikes it.
Pursue the light, not the brass of the lantern.
Exactly. Now, before we part ways, I want to leave you with one final, deeply unsettling thought to mull over as you step back into your modern life.
The final thought.
Think back to the core mechanic of the vizier's trap. He locked himself in a dark room. He wrote 12 entirely customized realities, each one perfectly engineered to flatter the ego of the recipient and enrage them against their neighbor. He handed them out in secret, and then he let human nature burn the city to the ground.
The recipe for destruction.
Today, we look around and think we are safe because we don't have an evil ancient vizier sitting in a stone tower orchestrating our doom. But we do have algorithms.
We do.
We have massive, opaque social media platforms locked away in literal black box server rooms.
Yeah.
And these machines are doing exactly what the vizier did, but on a scale of billions. Every time you open your phone, an invisible architect hands you a customized, completely unique scroll of truth. Your feed looks fundamentally, mathematically different from my feed
And those digital scrolls are often perfectly designed to confirm your deepest biases.
and make you absolutely furious at the person holding a different scroll.
The parallel is almost too perfect to be comfortable. The algorithm is the modern vizier, and engagement is the civil war.
It is terrifyingly exact. So the question you have to ask yourself today is this. Are we the emirs? Are we standing in the digital town square drawing our wooden swords over customized realities handed to us by an algorithm?
Are we allowing an invisible architect to divide the unified light into 12 or 12 million warring factions just to keep us engaged?
It is something you must deeply consider the next time you feel the righteous urge to go to war over a glowing screen. Thank you so much for joining us for this expansive deep dive. Keep questioning the limits of your vision. Keep doing the hard work to seek the laughing pomegranate in a world crowded with dark-hearted tulips. And always remember, just because your naked eye only sees the vast empty darkness of the sky, doesn't mean the galaxies aren't out there, waiting for you to look closer. Until next time.